Zachary back with you. This week we have another edition of Social Signals where we cover important social issues. This week's episode comes to you in two separate installments. So this is part one. For this episode I present what I call the Human Vending Machine, which is an analogy I use for dating apps. In part two I'll discuss some considerations and discussion topics I find interesting for those who wish to use dating apps or dating sites. Please tune in. Dating apps are useful, interesting, and exciting. They can also be frustrating and sometimes lead to some ongoing mental health concerns. Singles can go from feeling elated, encouraged, fulfilled, and motivated to feeling rejected, depressed, to confused. Whether you're online to date for adventure, romance, or to find a mate, whether you've already started or you're considering it, my next two videos are just for you. Hit the sub down there and you'll get my free weekly videos. Let's begin. Dating apps offer us a convenient and easy way to search for people we're interested in. If we're limited on time, have life arrangements that keep us busy with work, family, or caregiving, they can assist us by increasing the amount of people that we have exposure to and the facilitating of introductions and conversations, which hopefully leads us to dates, relationships, and more. For now, let's acknowledge how nice it can be to take an easy approach to starting conversations from the comfort of our own home. Some prefer this method of dating. Most people could equate the process of dating to that of doing online shopping. But why do I call them human vending machines? I use the analogy to describe a mechanism that dispenses humans to each other for the purposes of dating, hooking up, or relationships. The mechanism isn't human, what the mechanism vends is. Standard vending machines give us what we want, what we think we want, or they can end up stealing our money and leaving us hungry. We watch our what we want hanging by an invisible thread. We wait ever so meekly, staring at the machine and hoping for the ghost of Newton or a miracle to come along. Don't let that discourage you. Maybe you can get a refund, or someone else will come along and bump the machine into giving you two pieces for the price of one. There's a lot of power in the analogy here, bringing us themes that deal with commodification, consumerism, trends, our humanity, what motivates our decision-making, addiction, packaging, and deception, to name a few. I'll also argue that we have more scientifically based conclusions about how our brains developed. Our brains a lot of times lump us into a couple of broad categories: relationship seeking or pleasure seeking. We're not as modern as we think. Advertisers and dating site companies know this, and so do salesmen. They appeal to us with methods pulled from decades of research. When I came up with the ideas for this video, those are some things I wanted to talk about. Because dating is a test of our self-esteem, we'll start our discussion of using dating apps with a simple self-esteem concept. Then we'll move into values, some simple human psychology and behavior. Then in the second installment, we'll dive into another aspect of dating apps, such as marketing, packaging, and deception. Let's start with self-esteem. Healthy self-esteem should be the foundation we start from. I talk about this because I work every day with people with self-esteem issues, and I always want them to understand this fundamental idea. From the day we're born, we all have a true value just by being alive. We're worth something, always. Some have argued the survival of our gene line is strong evidence that we have earned our place in history per the survival of the fittest theory. Our family line survived long enough to bring us into the world. This means we were born with genetic code that had value over thousands of years. Darwin would smile upon us. Another different slant here is something brought us into being. Yet we're all here for some purpose, scientifically, religiously, or otherwise, and we all get to take our chances. Nonetheless, everyone is worth something. So if you've ever felt worthless, we're starting from the genuine value we all have. We can't have healthy self-esteem all the time. So if you're working on yours and that's part of whether or not you want to get on dating apps or sites, I encourage you to continue working at it. I'd like to give you a bit of context as well for the title of this video. While my personal dating experience on the apps has been mixed, and I came up with a vending machine analogy along the way because of some frustrating experiences I was having and the ways I ended up thinking about what's really taking place for everyone involved. I wondered what motivations people had for dating, why they were starting relationships or ending them, in addition to the things that we'll talk about. There really are thousands of topics we could cover related to dating, so I'll continue on this topic in later videos, and perhaps maybe a dating series is in the works. Today, we'll keep it simple. By the end of this video, you will have learned some much disputed theory, perspectives, and opinions that might be useful for dating apps. My goal is to remain objective while still making some claims. I won't tell you that will lead us to anything conclusive, nor that I know more than anyone else, or that I'm right. Just some things to think about. The things that will enrich the discussion most are your opinions, feedback, and research. Feel free to comment. Speaking of which, I've had over 700 views so far with 43 subscribers. Keep up the support and hit like, share, comment, and subscribe. Heck, hit all 4 and surprise me. When we hit 100 subscribers, I'll surprise you with a treat. Now, onto our content. I'm no stranger to dating apps. I'm not arguing for or against dating apps. I've used sites like Hinge and Bumble in the past with mixed success. I admit I ventured on Tinder too, mainly for research. It didn't end up with any matches, yet it was a very revealing experience. The cool thing about it is, everyone gets to do their own research, and I'd like to think that predominantly that research keeps us informed and healthy, as long as we're staying objective. Since so many people equate online dating to shopping, and shopping is a consumer-driven experience, I'd also like to think of the second fundamental idea of our human vending machines analogy, which is that even though shopping has become modernized and dating sites have as well, all of our shopping experiences are tailored to make us consume more, as well as to find what we want. And the way this is accomplished at large-scale levels finds its root in human psychology and behavior. The key difference is that instead of shopping for products, we're looking for partners. Though we think we've come very far from our prehistoric days, thousands of things are presented to us in a fashion that speaks to our ancient genetic programming. Neuroscientists think that our brains have developed in more complex ways by at least 10%. Though where does that leave the rest of it? I'll introduce some dusty theory, then we'll play with it a bit to see what kind of questions and dialogue we can generate from it. I'm going to talk about cave dwellers for a bit. Here's where things get controversial. Some researchers from the past came up with a triunal brain model and others. They focused on interesting theories that viewed the process of early brain development as simple and survival-based. I'm not saying I agree with those models, though we could argue that we're still survival-based and we behave in ways that enhance our survival into realms of comfort and power. Let's look at that with the caveat that scientists are always discovering new brain complexities. If you're interested in some contrast to the MacLean model and lots of discussion of human brain development, see the references in the description. I found MacLean's theory interesting because I do think that the brain in its base survival mode keeps things simple. When we move to the more complex, we're using that brain power and it costs us. Our brains also have very thick databases of experience which we log and then use for new experiences to compare to. To paraphrase and condense grossly MacLean's controversial past research, it went a little like this. We're all still cave dwellers with lizard brains. Though our brains evolved into more executive function in recent times, things are still very much 10,000 years old up there. The first developing parts of our brain were there to automate our body and help us behave in ways that preserved our survival. Quick responses, simplification of information to quickly sort and decide. Later, the pleasure center developed. The purpose there gave us feelings of contentment, discontentment, fear, and fun. We were a little beyond just surviving. Next, we experienced frontal lobe development, critical thinking, and strong emotions. So remember when he said it's still pretty old up there? Others still say we have a long way to go. I argue that if we use some parts of MacLean's theory and that we're still open to everyone's research, we're still primarily creatures of survival and habit. The brain makes things simple so we don't have to pull out the supercomputer all the time. Joe Dispenza argues this in his most recent book. So let's look at the parts of this theory, play with them a little, and see what happens. Then tie it into modernity. For simplicity's sake, I present some generic cave dweller male and female figures which are open to dispute as much as you like. Let's look at their roles. In the male's role, he spends a portion of his time looking for or hunting for food. He is bigger and stronger, and it would seem that this is the person who should face down beasts, kill, skin, and transport them. It's a hard job and requires the risk of injury, physical labor, and quick reflexes. He has formed survival habits. The female in her role spends most of her time in or near the cave, gathering things around, making items also necessary for survival. She probably discovered fire first, and she tends to it, crafts clothing, and if children are present, she cares for and protects them. She's not just sitting around. She has a hard job. It's physical and mental. She has formed survival habits. When male comes back, he best not be empty-handed. Everyone needs to eat. She has prepared the fire and gotten things ready for the cold night ahead. He finds a warm fire, perhaps a container holding some water, and he's grateful for all that Cave Woman has done. She sees he has a large kill in his hands, their source of protein for the next few days. She is grateful to him. She finds him a suitable mate. He expected this from her based on her role. She expected this from him based on her role. They each have separate and unified roles, though they generally see each other through functional lenses, the functional lenses of survival. They were both quite active, and research on Neanderthal shows they shared many tasks. Therefore, our male and female cave dwellers and their roles and habits expect certain things of each other. She seeks a male capable of demonstrating his ability to secure food, shelter, and a mate who can provide a source of ongoing protection, especially where her young are concerned. She may like that her mate is primarily very quiet, as he's learned to be for long days stalking prey or avoiding other clans that may be more developed and powerful than him. He looks for a mate who can demonstrate her caring for children, her crafting of goods that increase convenience, as well as the comfort and the closeness he feels with this special woman. He looks for her for fulfillment of his biological imperative. He finds her well suited as a mate. They both find each other ruggedly adorable, and they mate. So it goes. Even though this is a scenario and simplification of ancient behaviors and evidence of how cave people thought and behaved, it's still sporadic in what they discover. Whether they're wrong, right, or somewhere in between, a lot of people believe this was a long part of our history. In adaptation, their roles were gradually enhanced with love, intimacy, and a healthy sex life. Their brains developed, they evolved, and things got slightly more complicated. I will argue also that even though they had plenty to accomplish every day, back in the cave there probably wasn't much to do. So sex eventually must have become its own entertainment, much as it is for people today. Fast forward a bit in history, and we'll likely see where we started turning to sex for pleasure and love instead of just breeding. Prehistoric boredom. Maybe it was the birth of modern sex addictions? Seriously though, let's apply all that. We still have a lot of modern cave dwellers, people with roles and expectations. People have more options now though, and they're more clever. They still have the same motivations, though they've been slightly altered by time. I'm not alone when I see and have experienced that modern cave woman seeks her own security, as well as the security that modern caveman can provide. Different caves, different food, different ways of providing protection. Yes, she can do much of it on her own, but she wants someone to share the responsibilities and roles. She wants someone with potential. She looks to caveman for survival and other reasons. Caveman, on the other hand, isn't concerned as much about her ability to tend the fire, cook the food, or even gather things as he once was. In the fast-paced world, the stability she provides to him is a form of refuge from the elements like no other. He desires her for all the things of which she's capable, though he is primarily interested in something other than just her skills. He could do everything by himself, but he enjoys it with her better. So they both get what they want. They survive and they get to enjoy themselves. They fall in love with more complex brains, more recognizable feelings. So modern. What we also end up with is two people with free will and a ton of programming still present from 10,000 years ago. In this theory, not my theory, at the base level, they each seek satisfaction of these drives in their own selfish, survival-based ways. Then they get on dating apps. Think about that for a minute. How much has really changed when people look for partners? In an oversimplified form, I don't think dating apps are too many steps away from that. Now we just have faster ways to sort through the selections, otherwise business as usual. Cave dwellers with iPhones. That's one perspective. Take some all, or leave it on the table. Just take it with a grain of salt. It's one thing I love to hear people's opinions and arguments on. Which brings me to the title of this video. Calling dating apps human vending machines is a bit extreme, isn't it? Shock value? I'll be back next time to explain on episode 15. Stay tuned for that.